Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive with us.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're diving into, well, the early years of the SCLC.
Okay.
So that's the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, 1957 to 1960.
Right.
Kind of think of it as their freshman year, right? Fresh off the success of the Montgomery Bus Boycott,
Right.
Dr. King, nonviolent resistance kind of thrust onto the national stage.
Yeah.
We're going to look at how this organization kind of navigated, being born from the Black church and finding their own way,
Right.
all the hurdles they faced, and their, let's just say, complicated relationship with other major players in the civil rights movement.
Yeah. It's a really interesting time because you have, this organization defining itself against the established giants like the NAACP,
Right.
but then also having to deal with the rise of kind of newer, more radical groups like SNCC.
Yeah.
So it's a real balancing act.
Yeah, a balancing act indeed. So let's set the stage here, right? 1957, the SCLC bursts onto the scene, spearheaded by Dr. King and other Black ministers after that success in Montgomery.
Yeah.
What really made them stand out from the beginning?
Well, I think there's two key things, really. First, their focus was completely on the South.
Right.
Unlike some other national organizations like the NAACP, they were born in the South and really for the South, specifically to tackle the segregation there.
Yeah, it makes sense to go right to the source, right?
Exactly. And then the second defining characteristic, I would say, is their deep connection to the Black church.
Okay.
That was really their bedrock, providing this structure of organization, but also a network to mobilize people. And I would argue, most importantly, a sense of protection from persecution.
So the church acted kind of as a shield.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this ties back to Dr. King's experience during the Montgomery Bus Boycott that really solidified his belief in the power of nonviolent direct action. He called it truth force, and drew inspiration from Gandhi's idea of satyagraha.
Interesting. So we have a Southern-focused, church-powered organization,
Right.
fully committed to nonviolent direct action. That seems like a recipe for, well, instant success, right?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
Those early years, 57 to 1960, they were a lot rockier than people realize.
Okay.
The SCLC had, big dreams,
Yeah.
but also some serious growing pains.
Okay. Things are getting interesting. Tell me more about these, these struggles they face.
Well, take, for example, their first major initiative, the Crusade for Citizenship, which was this huge voter registration drive.
Right.
They had a goal of registering 2 million voters, which is very ambitious, but it was plagued by, logistical nightmares.
Oh, wow.
Shortages of funding and staff, and the infrastructure just wasn't really there.
Yeah.
They didn't have the kind of resources that a group like the NAACP had.
So are we saying that their reliance on the Black church, while a strength, also maybe held them back a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's a little bit of a paradox, but you see, not all ministers were, enthusiastic about activism. Some feared the repercussions, which meant the SCLC's reach wasn't as widespread as they'd hoped.
Right. And even, I think Dr. King himself later on kind of reflected on this period.
He did, yeah.
And acknowledged that maybe there was a need for a shift in strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And then kind of, at the same time, you have this, it's almost like this Shakespearean clash brewing between the SCLC and the NAACP. Was it going on there?
Yeah, complicated is definitely the word.
Okay.
I think you have this fundamental strategic divide, right?
Okay.
So the NAACP, led by Roy Wilkins at the time, favored a legal approach, right? Building on victories like on v. Board of Education.
Right.
So that meant going to court, challenging these segregation laws through the legal system. The SCLC, with King at the helm, they championed direct action. They believed it was necessary to force change in society, not just wait for legal victories to trickle down.
So different philosophies, but ultimately the same goal, right?
On paper, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there's this personal dimension, too, and the rumor mill was churning with talk of Wilkins being, a little jealous of King's, rising star.
Sure. Yeah.
A quote from the Pittsburgh Courier at the time kind of captures it. Jealousy among Black leaders is so thick you could cut it with a knife.
Wow.
So there's definitely some tension there.
Yeah, it really paints a picture of the, the undercurrents within the movement. And then to add another layer to this already complex mix, you have the emergence of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1960.
Right, on cue, yeah.
Yeah.
SNCC was born out of the student sit-in movement, which was kind of signaling a shift in the movement toward more grassroots activism. They were decentralized, focused on community organizing, and, let's be honest, a little impatient with the pace of change coming from these, established organizations.
So you have the SCLC kind of, trying to find its footing, and then you have this tension with the NAACP, and now this new wave of young, driven activists coming in. What a dynamic period.
Absolutely, and that's what makes studying this period so interesting.
Yeah.
It really challenges this idea of, one unified civil rights movement.
Right.
Because there are all these debates and disagreements, even rivalries, all playing out at the same time against this backdrop of huge societal change.
I think that's a great place to kind of, pause.
Take our breath.
Yeah, catch our breath. When we come back, we'll pick up with looking at the SCLC through the eyes of historians.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, we'll be right back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really highlights the complexity of, social movements in general. And all those different perspectives and approaches, we see those kind of reflected in how historians view the SCLC's impact, especially during these early years.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like looking at a historical photograph.
Okay.
Through different filters.
I like that.
Each one kind of highlights different details and offers a unique perspective.
Yeah, I love that analogy. So let's walk through some of those lenses, right? We were just talking about the idea of a unified civil rights movement, and I know some historians, like David Garrow, they place a lot of emphasis on the SCLC's role in pushing the movement towards those large-scale actions.
Right. The traditionalists, like Garrow, they argue that the SCLC, even with its early stumbles, really helped steer the movement away from this purely legalistic approach and towards this, more confrontational but still nonviolent strategy.
Okay.
They view the SCLC as kind of the architects, in a way, of those mass demonstrations that would really come to define the movement in the 1960s.
That's really interesting. But I know other historians kind of take a more critical view. What are they saying?
Yeah, revisionist historians, people like Stephen Oates, they acknowledge King's charisma and the power of his message.
Right.
But they kind of question the SCLC's organizational effectiveness.
Okay.
They argue that sometimes this focus on demonstrations, while visually powerful, sometimes lacked a long-term strategic plan.
So maybe more focused on the spectacle than really achieving tangible change.
Yeah, I think they would probably say that the early campaigns were more about raising awareness than really racking up concrete wins.
Yeah.
And they point to the, the limited measurable victories in those first few years.
Right, which makes sense considering all the, organizational, logistical issues that we talked about.
Exactly.
But I know there's even more perspectives to consider.
Oh, absolutely. You've got social historians who are really interested in that grassroots level of the movement.
Right.
They tend to focus more on groups like SNCC, which they see as more effective at empowering local communities. Think of historians like Charles Payne, who really champions that perspective.
So less about the top-down leadership and more about equipping those everyday people.
Exactly. Give them the tools and the resources they need to take charge of their own liberation.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And then you have continuity historians like Adam Fairclough.
Okay.
And they take this longer view, and they see the SCLC's early struggles not as failures, but as part of an evolution.
Okay, so laying the groundwork, even if those results weren't immediately apparent.
That's the argument, yeah. They see the SCLC as kind of bridging the gap between legal victories like Brown v. Board and the need for on-the-ground action to really force change.
Wow. So we have all these different lenses, the traditionalists, the revisionists, the social, the continuity.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, it's amazing how the same period can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Right, and that's kind of what makes studying history so captivating.
Yeah.
It's not just memorizing names and dates. It's about interpretation, about understanding the nuance and the complexity.
I love that.
Of the past.
So even with all these differing opinions about those early years, is it safe to say that the SCLC still left this undeniable mark on the movement?
I think absolutely.
Okay.
Even with their limited resources and those internal struggles.
Yeah.
They really made nonviolent direct action a force to be reckoned with, And his use of these public demonstrations to capture the attention of the media, brilliant. It brought the injustices of segregation onto the national stage.
It's true. And you think about the power of those images, right? Peaceful protesters being met with such brutality. And that really galvanized public opinion, I think, in a way that that maybe legal battles alone couldn't.
Right. And I think the dynamic between, the SCLC, the NAACP, and even SNCC, it really underscores a crucial point about social movements in general.
Okay.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
Different strategies are needed. Sometimes they work in tandem. Sometimes they're kind of in tension with each other. But they all work to create lasting change.
It's like this complex dance, right?
It is, yeah, each group playing its part.
Okay, so...
And speaking of a complex dance...
Wait, is there another twist to this story?
Let's just say that the SCLC's internal dynamics were maybe even more intricate than we've let on so far.
Ooh, internal drama. I love it.
There were power struggles, strategic disagreements, and even philosophical differences within the organization itself.
Oh, I can't wait to hear about this.
But we'll have to save that fascinating chapter for the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so welcome back, everyone. We're wrapping up our deep dive here into the early years of the SCLC, and we promise we're going to uncover some of that internal drama.
Yeah, buckle up.
Give me the inside scoop here.
The SCLC wasn't always, this perfectly unified machine.
Right.
Even within their ranks, there were clashes over strategy, leadership styles, even the role of religion in their activism.
Okay, so let's dig into those disagreements a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you know how we talked about the SCLC's strong foundation in the Black church?
Yeah, that was one of their key defining features, right?
Exactly. It was a source of strength, but also a point of contention.
Okay.
Because even within the SCLC leadership, there were different views on just how overtly religious their message should be.
Okay.
Some leaders felt that, leaning too heavily on Christian theology might alienate potential allies.
Right.
Especially in the North.
Makes sense.
Where there's much greater religious diversity.
Right.
So it was this balancing act.
Yeah.
Between kind of their core identity and the need to broaden their appeal.
Sure.
And then there were also these questions about leadership style.
Yeah.
I mean, Dr. King,
Right.
undeniably charismatic, gifted orator.
Yeah.
But some folks in the SCLC felt he was too focused on being the face of the movement.
Right.
They argued that a more collaborative leadership approach might be more effective.
So even back then, there were these discussions about, the potential downsides of a cult of personality.
Yeah, it's a theme that pops up throughout history.
Right.
And then on top of all that, there were these strategic debates.
Oh, yeah.
About how to best utilize nonviolent direct action, right? Should they prioritize those large-scale demonstrations?
Sure.
The ones that grabbed media attention.
Yeah.
Or should they focus on smaller, more localized campaigns to try and build power from the ground up?
So many tough choices.
A lot of tough choices.
It sounds like it must have been, pretty challenging to navigate all these differing opinions.
Oh, it definitely wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But, these disagreements weren't a sign of weakness.
Right.
I think it reflected the dynamism of the movement.
Yeah.
You had all these passionate individuals, really grappling with these complex questions about, what's the most effective way to bring down a system of oppression.
And it makes you realize that even within a movement that's striving for justice, there's still going to be internal, friction and debate and different approaches and
that's inevitable.
Yeah. But ultimately, despite those internal tensions, would you say that the SCLC still made pretty remarkable contributions during these early years?
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay.
I mean, they brought nonviolent resistance to the forefront of the conversation.
Right.
They forced America to confront the realities of segregation.
Yeah.
And they inspired a whole generation of activists.
I think that's so important.
It's huge.
And I think for our listeners out there, maybe who are just, starting to learn about this chapter of history, what would you say is kind of the key takeaway you want them to remember about the SCLC's early years?
Well, I think the most important thing is that the civil rights movement was never, a simple, straightforward story.
Right.
It was tapestry.
I love that.
Woven from so many different threads, organizations with their own goals and their own approaches, different personalities, different strategies. And the SCLC, even with all its, complexities and internal contradictions, was a crucial part of that.
I love that. And, and that's what we try to do here, right on the deep dive, is really kind of go beyond the surface.
Peel back the layers.
Yeah, explore the nuance, the different viewpoints, uncover the human stories that make history so fascinating.
Exactly, and I think this deep dive into the SCLC has, brought up some really important questions.
Yeah.
For us all to think about, how do social movements balance this need for unity with the importance of having different perspectives.
The tough question.
How do leaders navigate the complexities of power, of strategy, and ultimately what lessons can we learn from all this to guide our own efforts towards a more just and equitable world?
Those are questions worth thinking about for sure. So a huge thank you to you for guiding us on this incredible journey through history.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners out there, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the SCLC's early years. And like always, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those thought-provoking questions. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.